Thanks for tuning in to The Ordinary Filmmaker. Today I've got some really great updates for you. I've got updates on the R1, the R3, the new autofocus system that Canon's working on that could be in the R1, what's happening with the EFM mount, and APS-C R-System cameras, as well as sales on the R5 and the R6. So I've got a lot of information for you. This is credible information because it's coming from Takuri-san. That's right, DP Review did an interview with Takuri-san. He's the CEO of Image Communication Business Operations, and I have that written down here because, well, his title, I just can't seem to memorize it. I've done about 6 takes of it here, and I finally decided I'm just going to read off the tablet. So before I get into the news, and I'm not going to take much time, only about 30 seconds, I just want to tell you about the environment that I'm working in right now. It's currently about 88, it's 88 degrees, it's completely sunny, it's very humid, and for those of you who prefer Celsius, well, it's very hot. I mean, shirt sticking to you kind of hot. I'm using an air conditioning system right here to keep me cooling down so I don't overly sweat. What is it? Well, it's a tray filled with ice and water, so I put my feet in the water to help keep me cool so I don't sweat and look like I'm nervous or anything. So it's very, very hot here. Now, I'm using the tray of ice to help keep me cool, but I'm shooting with the R5, and you know how that does in high heat. But I'm using the Ninja 5. I took the CF Express and SD card out of the slots, and I'm recording directly to the Ninja. Now, I've already wasted about 10 minutes trying to do the intro because I could never say Takuri-san's position, Image Communication Business Operations. So let's see how long I can go and if I can finish this video. Okay, so let's get to the key highlights of that interview. Now, one of the first things they talked about was, is the R3 Canon's new flagship camera? Well, Takuri-san went ahead and said that, well, no, the 1DX Mark III is still seen as the flagship stills hybrid camera. But this is a quote, this is what he said. It's true that the EOS R3 exceeds the EOS 1DX Mark III. You could consider the R3 the flagship camera. That might explain why we're hearing two different things, that we're getting an R1, it is going to be the flagship camera, but the R3 seems like it's the flagship camera. It's replacing a lot of the key capabilities that you get with the 1DX Mark III. So as a sports, fast action shooter, if you're doing motorsports, well then the R3 is going to be a better camera. It can shoot 30 frames per second at 30 megapixels. It's a lot higher than the 1DX Mark III. And video-wise, well, the R3 may not be that much better than the 1DX Mark III, but the R5 certainly is, shooting 8K oversampled 4K, 4K at 120 frames per second, and of course 8K at 30 frames per second, RAW, All-I, or IPB. So the 1DX Mark III isn't really looking like the flagship camera. Yes, it's a flagship camera of, well, you know, of last year that lasted for 3 months before the R5 came out. But here's what here's what Takuri-san said of the R1. We believe that in order to bestow the RF camera with a 1 model designation, we must achieve an even greater level of performance, and we continue to work towards those high standards. Okay, when I hear a company refer to continuing to work towards those standards, well, we're definitely talking about the future. They don't have those capabilities yet in the R1. Now, we're going to call it the R1 because they're calling it a 1 designated camera. We got the R3, the R5, the R6. It's going to be called the R1. This is the worst kept secret. This camera is going to be called the R1, and they're still working on it. I don't expect that we're going to get a development announcement later this year as initially rumored. In fact, I'm really doubting, based on the way this is worded, that we're even going to get the EOS R1 in 2022. I think it's more likely that we'll see it in 2023 or even 2024. Let's take a look at the quote one more time. And we continue to work towards reaching those high standards. The R1, the 1 series camera, is what's considered the flagship camera for stills and video in their stills hybrid line. We don't have to go back far in time. Look at the 1 series versus the 5 series in the 1DX Mark II and the 5D Mark IV going back to 2016. The 1DX Mark II wasn't that much better than the 5D Mark IV. It had 4K 30, well, the 1DX Mark II had 4K 60, the 5D Mark IV had 4K 30. So not a huge difference there, and they both used Motion JPEG, which I'm not going to get into. That was just an embarrassing time. The other main difference in video was that the 1DX Mark II could shoot 120 frames per second in 1080, whereas the 5D Mark IV could shoot 120 frames per second in 720. The point I'm trying to convey is that the 1 series will always have better video capabilities and stills capabilities than a 5 or even 3 series. So we can rest assured that the R1 is going to have at least 8K raw video. Now, how is it going to differentiate itself from the current 5 series in the R5? I think Canon could go one of two ways. They can go ahead and do what Sony did and increase the megapixel size, so go instead of 45 megapixels, go to 50 megapixels and do something like an 8.6 oversampled 8K and do 8.6K oversampled 4K. It's certainly possible. Or what they could choose to do, and this is going to require a lot more throughput, is offer 8K 60 frames per second. They can go one of those two routes, or they can even do both. And as far as stills goes, well, the R1 is going to have to offer 30 frames per second at minimum, but with a 45 megapixel sensor or greater, then you're going to have a lot more detail to work with. So if the R3 isn't quite where you need it, then you're going to be able to get the R1 that's going to have a large image sensor, at least 45 megapixels. It's going to be able to do 8K video, and it's going to be the sharpest 8K video. It's going to be better than what the R5 can do. And as far as stills goes, it's going to be great for portraits, fashion, landscape. I mean, you name it, it can do it. And at least 30 frames per second at 45 to 50 megapixels, it's going to be pretty impressive. Now, in terms of could it go 60 megapixels or even higher? And it's possible they could go as high as 60. I don't think so. And here's why. Canon is working on a 100 plus megapixel camera, as is Sony, and I don't see them really pushing into that, sort of taking away from that camera. So I think that the R1 is definitely going to be around 45 to 50 megapixels, and of course they already have a 45 megapixel sensor that can base it off of. And like the R3, it's going to be a back illuminated sensor. So the R1 is looking to be a great camera. Going back to the R3 isn't the R1. It might seem like the flagship camera because, well, it's acting like it. In many ways, it's better than the 1DX Mark II, sorry, the Mark III. And in many ways, as far as fast action, it's better than the Canon EOS R5. So while it's not Canon's historical flagship camera, it's definitely stepped up and is taking the lead, at least until we get the R1 coming out. As far as the highest resolution video, Takura-san confirmed that the R3 will have 4K video. It will be oversampled 4K video, but we're not going to see 6K, we're not going to see 8K, and we're definitely not going to see 16K. So the R3 isn't really aimed at video, although, let's be honest, oversampled 4K video is pretty awesome. Now, in terms of autofocus, we've heard an awful lot about quad pixel autofocus in reference to rumors about the upcoming Canon EOS R1 starting in around the second, third quarter of last year. Well, Takura-san said that when they look at improving their autofocus, they're really looking at three things, and one is sensitivity. I mean, what's the point of having an autofocus system if it's not accurate and reliable? Yeah, Panasonic, I'm talking about you. No. Yes, I know you keep working on it. Yes, it keeps getting better, but I still don't trust it. It's not good enough. So sensitivity is one. The next thing is, well, of course, speed. I mean, if you listen to Jeremy Clarkson all the time, he's always harping on about speed. And so is Canon, so autofocus, sensitivity, and speed. The next thing Takura-san said is, well, yes, things like quad pixel autofocus or improved dual pixel autofocus. So where are we going to see this improved autofocus system? Well, the R3 is going to be improved over the R5, but I don't think we're going to get quad pixel autofocus because, well, Canon has come out and said it's not going to be quad pixel autofocus. If quad pixel autofocus is ready for prime time, we're going to see it debut in the R1. Again, another reason to make it the flagship camera. Last summer, I did a review of the Canon 800mm and 600mm. I actually had the 800mm here, and I loved it. I took some amazing shots of Jupiter and Saturn, the moon, and no, I'm not going to put a ton here. I think you've seen my moon videos enough. It's like going over to your friend's house and he says, hey, by the way, you want to see some new home videos of my kids? you run like screaming. So no more Saturn, no more Jupiter and Moon videos for some time. I'm going to wait till I come up with some new stuff, even though I got video of Jupiter and its bands. It's pretty cool, but we'll talk more about that later. So Takura-san said this. He said that as in relation to the lenses, the STM lenses like the 600mm and 800mm f11, that yes, they are going to be making more inexpensive STM super telephoto or telephoto lenses. So could we expect an affordable 1200mm lens? I know I'd be looking for that. Now I'd probably expect the f-stop to go up to something silly like f15, or but what about a 400mm? And what I love about these lenses is, yes, they may not be suitable for doing professional work for you guys shooting magazine covers, and those of you that really want the best detail you can get out of the birds you shoot. But I can tell you this, I can't remember another piece of camera gear that I've had as much fun with as I have with the 800mm, including the 2x telephoto, or 2x extender, the RF 2x extender. Truly incredible. The fact that I was able to zoom into the moon and just slowly have the moon pass through the frame was truly incredible. To capture 6 moons of Jupiter and to be actually able to see some banding, that was impressive. And then of course, sneaking up on wildlife, them not knowing you there and getting some great shots and some great video, it's been an awful lot of fun. It really is one of my favorite lenses. The only problem I have with it is it weighs a lot, and this is the lighter version of it, so it's really good news to hear that Canon is going to be coming out with some more affordable super telephoto lenses. All right, now sales. The Canon R5 and R6, according to I'm saying his name wrong. Let me go up and look at the spelling again. Takura-san, Canon CEO of Image Communications and Business Operations, said that the Canon R5 and R6 have exceeded all their sales projections for those two cameras. But how many of us are really surprised? When the 5D Mark IV came out and the 1DX Mark II came out, we're looking at back around 2015, 2016, I certainly remember these cameras were largely panned to some degree, especially when it came to the video. I mean, seriously, motion JPEG, a severely cropped 4K on these expensive cameras. Slow motion, 120 frames per second in 720 on the 5D and 120 frames per second in 1080. And your stills capabilities, dynamic range. Looking at the Sony cameras at the time, these two cameras were relatively, well, I wouldn't say they were panned, but they weren't as well received as they should have been. And several held off, waiting to see what was going to come next. So there was a lot of hesitation, especially as we came up to 2020. More and more people looking at buying a new camera looked at the 5D and found it wanting, and the EOS R was more or less just a mirrorless version of the 5D and wasn't any better, although it gave you access to those RF lenses. So a lot of people waited to see what Canon was going to do in 2020 and 2021. Then of course there was other cameras. Now Canon for the longest time had like a 1.7 times crop in their 4K video, and if you already had a 1.6 times crop APS-C camera like the 90D, then your crop was effectively over 3 times, which was just getting a little bit silly. The detail wasn't there, and yes, the 90D had 120 frames per second in 1080, but you had to shoot it like f22 because, well, autofocus was locked off. And of course, 24 frames per second was taken away but put back in, but we still don't have all eye in the 90D. So when it comes to looking at Canon cameras, yes, the T8i in the Rebel series and the 90D are still very good cameras, but if you want a little bit better, you're kind of forced into cameras like the R5. So when it was announced that Canon was going to do uncropped 4K video, they were going to do 4K at 120 frames per second, again without a crop, that they were going to do 8K raw video with IBIS, with autofocus, dual pixel autofocus, not contrast detect like they've done in the past when they give you 4K. No, it seemed too good to be true. In fact, I remember a lot of the quotes saying, "Simon, this is nuts. This is stupid. Like, there's no way that Canon's going to leapfrog the competition. This doesn't make any sense." Well, the only thing that wasn't right about this was the overheating. Now, it didn't say it didn't overheat. But, you know, telling a lie isn't always saying something that isn't true. Sometimes it's just leaving out something significant, and overheating after you turn the camera on for 5 minutes and shot some photos, yeah, that's not acceptable. So there was a lot of pent-up demand. I'm not surprised that the R5 has sold as well as it has. It's just a truly incredible camera with so much detail on the still side and on the video side. Now, that takes me to the next portion of this video. Well, it doesn't take me to the next portion. It takes me to the next set of questions. And several questions were related to what Canon was planning over the next 5 to 10 years, the long-term outlook. And what Canon said was, Takura-san said that, look, you know what, as far as going forward is on the consumer space, which is where a lot of these cameras are still aimed at, it's all about 4K, it's about 8K, it's about HDR. Your 8K is no longer going to be seen in high-end cameras, going to see it, and this is from Canon, this is not me projecting and offering my analysis, but even Canon said we're going to see 8K in compact cameras. So that means we're going to see it sub $1,000 and even sub $500. 8K is going to become a thing. So we're going to see it in a lot more of these cameras. So it's really turning out to be a very, very exciting time. And a lot of times we get these rumors with camera executives and they really don't say much. It's more or less just repeating the talking points of the past. But here, Takura-san gave us more information about the R1 and the R3 and helped set things up. Canon does see the R1 as to be in a camera that's going to exceed our expectations like the R5 did for the 5D Mark V. I mean, the R5 just blew a lot of us away, not necessarily because Canon is the best camera company out there, but for what seemed like 10 years, the cameras that were coming out seemed to have a very large cripple hammer attached to their capabilities. I really expect the R1, think of this, think of the R5, for example, think of all the capabilities of the R5, and then take the R1, give it those same capabilities, then bump up your stills to 30 frames per second. Take away that overheating in video, or at least reduce it significantly because you're going to have a larger body. An improved autofocus system, better low light performance. I think when the R1 comes out, and I really hate saying this, but I think it's going to leave us with our mouths open, leave us speechless, and at least me, make me want to get it. But I like the R5. While it's not light, it's not as heavy as the R1. Well, as heavy as I think the R1 will be. So, yeah, some very interesting updates. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about stuff behind the scenes. Now, I'm a little frustrated right now because the sun is starting to peek through. Let's see if I can go back a little bit. No, let's go forward a little bit. There we go. The planet's moving. You know, it's this time of day. I started shooting at around 4 o'clock and everything was set up perfectly, but now the sun's starting to shine on me. I don't mind it coming around here, but once it pokes me in the eye, I lose concentration. So the first topic I want to talk about behind the scenes here is the overheating of the R5. It is currently 88 degrees. It is fair. It is very humid. I'm going to tap on the Ninja here to see how long it's been recording for, and we are up to 28 minutes. Let the focus catch up. There, is it? I can't really tell if it's in focus or not. Let me go a little closer. Come back. Yeah, I'm going to assume it's in focus right now, and if it's not, I'm going to be really, really upset. I feel like Casey from Camera Conspiracy is doing the, am I in focus? How about now? It looks like it is. But you see, the R5 right now is about 6-7 feet away from me. And with my eyes, I truly can't tell if I'm in focus or not. But let's continue anyways. And if it's out of focus, I do apologize. I'm not going to reshoot this. It's just far too hot. So like I said, it's 88 degrees. It's very humid. There is a slight breeze that comes up every now and then. But I've been recording for, well, now 30 minutes. And it hasn't overheated. And I know when it overheats because the Ninja 5 will just say, hey, your Canon R5 just overheat. It's going to stop recording. So I'm pretty happy that I can record in heat like this without it overheating. I couldn't before I had the Ninja 5, so that's really good news there. And I'm also kind of excited about this time of year. I was really expecting May to be an exciting time. Canon rumor says that tomorrow the R3 is going to be announced, and I really look forward to that if that is the case, but we'll just have to wait and see, because rumors aren't always accurate. But I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with the R1. I'm really wondering now, based on everything we've heard, if the R1 is actually going to come out in 2022. Based on, again, let's look at that quote again. Again, this is from Takura-san, and he said that, which quote is it here? Looking, you could consider, we believe that in order to bestow an RF camera with the one model designation, we must achieve an even greater level of performance, and we continue to work towards reaching those high standards. Now again, it's high level speak. They could be pretty close to having this out in the field and testing it, but it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like the R1's far off in the future. And if you are Canon and you were just getting ready to announce the R3, you probably wouldn't want to make it sound like the R1 is imminent. It's only a few months away. So the R1, it's been rumored for a long time. Canon has said here that yes, they're working on the R1, but as far as when we're going to get it, no one knows. We know very little about the R1. The only way to truly gauge what the R1 is going to have is, again, look at the R5, consider that a base, and then do what Canon normally does with the R1 in relation to the 5 series. And I think that's where we're going to see the R1. In terms of timeline, I really don't know. Like I said, Canon rumors said we'd get it in the first half of 2022, and an announcement in around NAB 2021, which is, or is this 2021? Yes, it's 2021. And that's right around October, the first week of October. But again, that rumor was some time ago, and what we've seen this year is all the delays that we had last year weren't because people weren't working in factories. Is it because people were at home, they were ordering a lot of stuff, they were ordering different stuff, supply chains got completely disrupted, automobiles, camera gear, computers, memory, storage, sweaters, shirts, lights, you name it, it's being affected. And we're even seeing in the stores, grocery stores, certain fruits and vegetables that are normally there, aren't there. And it's all caused partly because of a chip shortage that's affecting everything, but it's also because when you look at the ports of California or Los Angeles and other major shipping ports around the world, instead of having maybe 2 container ships waiting to offload stuff, you could have 5, 10, 15, 20 container ships waiting, sitting in the port, because so many people are clicking on purchase from Amazon around the world and other online stores, and that disrupts the regular shipping where people normally go into stores. So I'd really be surprised if we see the R1 this year. I think 2023, the first quarter of 2023, like maybe January or February, is more likely, and Canon has done that before with their 1 series cameras. The 1DX Mark III, wasn't it January of 2020? So really, really exciting times. So I'm going to close out the video. I've been shooting for 33 minutes and haven't had a problem here. So again, shooting in 4K HQ, that's the 8K oversampled 4K with the Ninja 5 and no overheating. Thanks so much for watching The Ordinary Filmmaker. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm always giving away prizes. And once I hit 30,000 subscribers, which is taking a whole lot longer than I expect, and I apologize, I seem to have hit a plateau, but once I hit that stage, it's a couple of Angelbird V90 SD cards, the 128 gigabyte, and a bunch of Ulanzi LED lights. And of course, I am still giving away the R5. That's in the description down below. Maybe you are as tired of hearing it as I am of saying it. So since I'm not even close to 100,000, I'm not going to talk about the giveaway. As we get closer, I'll bring it up. But I want to say a big thanks. Look, you've been watching this for about half an hour now. Thank you so much for subscribing, for liking, for watching and supporting my channel. I very much do appreciate it. And while I'm not wearing it right now because it's so hot, if you want to buy the Ordinary Filmmaker baseball cap, it's $34.99, and it can be bought through ordinaryfilmmaker.com. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.